It was a stormy morning in January 2026, deep in the North Atlantic, where a Force 8 blizzard raged like a wild beast of ice and wind. Imagine, dear listeners, on the radar screen of the U.S. Coast Guard cutter USCGC Monroe, a target blinks just 2 nautical miles away. Data from the P-8 reconnaissance aircraft confirms a 100% match with the Bella One, that notorious Venezuelan oil smuggling ship that had disappeared from all global tracking systems for 3 weeks. Everything seemed settled, the mission clear, intercept, and seize. But as the high-performance searchlight stabbed through the storm and panned over the target, dead silence reigned in the Combat Information Center. Yes, it was the Bella One, but the name Bella One was as if erased. Instead, Marinara was emblazoned in fresh paint, and at the top of the mast, the Russian flag fluttered defiantly. In the blink of an eye, a simple smuggling bust transformed into a direct confrontation with the Kremlin. Retreat would mean that US sanctions are a joke, a sign of weakness before the eyes of the world. Charging forward, however, risked an international flashpoint that could channel the tensions between Washington and Moscow, already loaded with years of mistrust, sanctions, and geopolitical rivalries, into an explosive war. The decision time measured in minutes before the ship escaped into international waters. No room for error, just raw hatred between superpowers simmering here on the high seas. Stay tuned until the end of this gripping narrative to understand why the US Navy didn't fire a single shot yet destroyed the entire Russian-Venezuelan oil smuggling network at the root. A chess move that left the Kremlin speechless, a masterpiece of gray zone warfare that lifted the long-standing enmity between the USA and Russia. Think of the Ukraine crisis. Arctic rivalries, and Putin's alliance with Maduro to a new level of malice. To grasp why this fight took place in these deadly waters near the Arctic, let us rewind 72 hours. After the operation to arrest former President Maduro, Washington ordered a total cutoff of the oil money, keeping the remnants of the Venezuelan regime alive. But the smugglers were one step ahead. They built the so-called Shadow Fleet, hundreds of dilapidated oil tankers acquired via shell companies constantly switching off their AIS transponders to transport illegal oil worldwide. The Bella One was one of the wiliest old foxes in this fleet, a symbol of the desperate malice of a regime resisting the imperialist USA by pacting with Russia, a country itself suffering under sanctions and viewing Venezuela as a bulwark against the West. Normally, Venezuelan oil would flow through the Caribbean into the Atlantic, but this route was now under the iron control of US Southern Command, where patrols lurked like sharks. So they chose another path north into the icy waters near Iceland, where they relied on the weather and gaps in surveillance. The captain of the Bella One believed he had found a back door to smuggle hundreds of millions of dollars in oil to the world, an act of pure provocation against the USA intended to undermine the economic strangulation of Maduro. Simultaneously, a US satellite detected a Yasen-M class attack submarine diving from a Russian northern base. Pentagon analysts thought it was a routine patrol, but when National Reconnaissance Office satellites located an unusual heat signature in the North Atlantic, the data flowed immediately into the US Navy's tactical network. From the Keflavik base in Iceland, a P-8A Poseidon launched and flew directly into the eye of the storm. Using synthetic aperture radar, it penetrated the blizzard, confirming a 100% match with the profile of the Bella One. The coordinates reached the USCGC Monroe, which raced toward the target at top speed, 30 knots through roaring waves. They thought they were snapping up a defenseless smuggler, but as the Monroe got closer, the situation tipped dramatically. The Monroe's passive sonar system suddenly lit up. The Russian submarine wasn't patrolling far away. It was lurking silently and secretly just 5 nautical miles from the tanker like a ghostly guardian. And the shock didn't stop. As the searchlight panned over the hull, the name Bella One was gone instead. Marinara, and the Russian flag. A bold chess move by Russia, having relabeled the ship during the blizzard and protected it with heavy escorts. The USA wanted to herd a sheep into the pen, but now they were staring into the eyes of a wolf pack. The Marinara now radiated extreme self-confidence, implicitly threatening, "This ship is under the protection of the Russian Federation. Keep your distance or bear the consequences." The direct attack option collapsed. The USA couldn't sink the tanker without risking a torpedo exchange with the Russian nuclear submarine, which would turn the enmity marked by cyber attacks, espionage, and proxy wars into an open conflict. They needed a smarter, more devious approach to break this alliance, an alliance born of mutual hatred for the West, where Maduro saw Russia as a savior and Putin used Venezuela as leverage. Dear listeners, imagine you are the captain of the Monroe staring at a nuclear submarine. Would you charge ahead or back down? Write in the comments, type 1 for attack, 2 for retreat. I am curious about your decision. Could that be the spark that ignites World War III? From 700 feet deep, the Yasen-M submarine suddenly sent an active ping, a powerful sonar pulse revealing its position to signal challengingly, "I am here and conducting legal international patrols. Do you dare touch me?" Russia played the ambiguity card masterfully. The submarine was there but denied escort duties. The surface ship hoisted the flag to prevent approach. A US attack would make the USA the aggressor. But the US Navy found a weak spot in the opponent's armor. While the P-8 circled above its high-resolution electro-optical camera system captured a tiny but crucial detail on the stern of the Marinara. Although the name and flag were changed, the IMO number remained stamped into the steel 9234567. The intelligence system cross-referenced immediately it belonged to the Bella one registered in Panama. The proof Marinara was fake, the Russian flag a camouflage. In the command center, Captain Monroe received the order from the commander of the U.S. Second Fleet, start Operation Decoy. The USA knew that the Russian submarine's primary mission wasn't the protection of an oil barrel, but protection against major military threats. They exploited this doctrine to create a gigantic phantom. 50 miles east, another P-8 Poseidon inconspicuously dropped a series of new generation sonar buoys. These emulated the characteristic sounds of a carrier strike group at high speed, propeller noise of an aircraft carrier, the water cutting of Aegis destroyers. Deep under the sea, the Russian submarine's passive sonar caught the signals. The computer alarmed, U.S. main forces approaching from starboard. For the Russian captain, this was a strategic threat. Instinctively and according to protocol, he left the tanker's escort position to intercept the Ghost Fleet. The Marinara now drifted defenseless in the ocean like a fish on a cutting board. But the USA didn't rush blindly. They launched the second strike, the checkmate. Captain Monroe contacted the Russian Ministry of Defense via diplomatic channels with a cold ultimatum. We are advancing on the Marinara at coordinates, inserted fake coordinates. This ship flies the Russian flag, but the IMO number 9234567 on the hull confirms it is the Bella 1 Panamanian nationality. We request Moscow to confirm is the Russian Navy issuing illegal flags to foreign ships to evade sanctions. That was a merciless diplomatic chess move. The USA forced the Kremlin into a corner. Confirmation would mean Russia admits before the UN Security Council to operating a smuggling network and protecting international criminals, a political suicide that would deepen Russia's isolation amidst sanctions regarding Ukraine and Arctic disputes. Denial saved face but sold out the ship and crew. 3 minutes of crushing silence passed. Finally, the Russian answer came, brief and cruel as expected. The Russian Navy has recorded no activities at these coordinates. Any ship there does not represent the Russian Federation. The pawn was sacrificed. As soon as the denial arrived, the green light came. First, the Monroe activated its electronic warfare system, jamming all satellite communications of the Marinara. The tanker was blind and deaf, isolated from the world. Then the MH-65 Dolphin helicopter hovered above dropping entanglement nets directly in front of the bow, ultra-strong synthetic ropes wrapped around the propellers, forcing the bulk carrier 200 meters long, 50,000 tons to a halt. The engines roared in vain before falling silent. The LED special team rappelled down, but instead of shooting, they threw flashbangs and activated the LRADA high-frequency sound beam, causing intense ear pain without permanent damage. The mercenaries on board, armed to the teeth, were immediately incapacitated, throwing weapons away, covering ears, and retreating. The team advanced in tight CQB formation, subduing and disarming the guards without a shot. A triumph of precision over brute force, they stormed the bridge. The Russian captain tried to barricade the door, but American hydraulic breaching tools cracked the steel locks in 10 seconds. During the search, a shocking truth was revealed. The oil tanks were almost empty. The Marinara was not transporting oil to Venezuela, but was en route to West Africa to load weapons and secret missile components in exchange for oil for the old regime. A scandal exposing the Maduro-Putin alliance as a weaponized conspiracy, feeding hatred of the USA with military escalation. Had the USA focused only on oil, the disappointment would have been great. But through the intact capture with computers, ledgers, and communication devices undestroyed, they gained an intelligence treasure. The entire global smuggling network list, ghost accounts and identities of corrupt officials on 3 continents. The value, hundreds of times higher than the oil, a strike into the heart of the Russian-Venezuelan axis, paralyzing their covert operations worldwide. With irrefutable evidence and overwhelming presence, the captain of the Marinara capitulated. The Russian flag was hauled down, the ship officially seized. In the darkness of the Atlantic, the Marinara was not just a captured ship, it proved a new US war doctrine. Dominate the seas through information and psychology, not just firepower. Imagine what would have happened if the scenario deviated by just a millimeter. What if the Yasen-M captain hadn't fallen for the acoustic bait? If he stayed and fired a warning torpedo to protect fleet honor, or if Russia went all in and claimed the ship as its own, despite the fake IMO number. Such a misstep in the news today wouldn't speak of a smuggling bust, but of NATO Article 5 global oil markets in chaos, the North Atlantic as a new ship graveyard. The line between law enforcement and world war is thinner than a breath proof of the gray zone masterpiece of the US Navy. But the game is not over. The history of superpower confrontation is an endless cycle of adaptation and revenge. Today, the Shadow Fleet lost a pawn. Tomorrow, they learn bitterly. Will Russian tankers be escorted by open frigates instead of secret submarines in the future? Will they develop IMO spoofing tech that deceives even P-8 laser scanners? Or will Moscow retaliate by hijacking Western ships in the Arctic Ocean? The cat-and-mouse game on the oceans becomes more intense, more refined, more dangerous. And you, dear listeners, how do you evaluate Moscow's ruthless sacrifice of the pawn to save the rook? Do you believe the USA will keep the upper hand forever, or will Russia strike back next month with a surprise attack? Share your thoughts in the comments, share with military enthusiast friends. Understand that modern war is a battle of minds, not just muscles. Subscribe and activate the bell, because at the next geopolitical chess game we will